Jamie Van Cuyk, it's a pleasure to have you here on the Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast today.
Thank you, Pete, so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm always excited, wrapping things around my 5P model that I have. And we're going to talk about people today, Jamie. And it's often the one that brings us the most freedom, but often the one that can cause us the biggest headaches as well.
People are one of those things that does bring you that stress relief and brings you a different type of stress as well in your business. But for me, it's one of the most exciting things. I love the people aspect of business.
I look at the Great Resignation not as an issue as much as an opportunity.
Mm.
And if you have everything in alignment with your business, it's a real opportunity to attract the right fits so that your customers can enjoy and be fulfilled through them. Here's one of the things that I deal with a lot. With my coaching practice is that people, the small business owners there, they've been making the decisions for the last 3, 5, 10 years. They're still the predominant decision maker, not only in the big decisions, but often in the middle level and the small level decisions. And my philosophy around this is that all decisions should be made at the lowest possible level of the organization. What's your thought on that?
Yes, and I love how you put the lowest possible level of the organization. We're not saying give the big decisions to your individual contributors that are the
No.
lowest rung on the ladder. It's where should those decisions be made, and then you being informed of the decision. And
Yeah.
sometimes you're being brought into the conversation, but you're not really that final decision maker. You're kind of giving a little bit of a say so that person can make the right decision. Or, sometimes you do have to sign off because of that decision is going to have a financial implication and you need to sign off on, yes, I agree to spend this money. But the other person should be making that decision. I was actually just speaking with someone earlier today where they're running an IT department in a company and they came and said, here's what needs to get done. And then the CEO was like, okay, thanks. We're going to do this other thing that's completely against it. But then you have to implement it and run it. And they're like, all right, well, I don't know how this is going to work out, but this wasn't even what I wanted to do. It's not even what I think is right for the departments. But because they weren't allowed to make the final decision and the CEO did, there's now that conflict that's there.
Business owners get into this, I'll call it a rut, because I actually think it's a bit of a rut where they are making all these decisions and they are feeling as though they've had to do this. One thing is they've had to do it, right?
Right.
They've had to make the decisions. But once you start building this team, how can control freaks actually let go and delegate? Like what gets them through and what helps them with that?
Yes. So the first thing to remember is if you really identify as that control freak that doesn't want to delegate is just remember you don't have to hand over the keys to the business on day one. And
Yeah.
chances are you've already been doing that. You haven't delegated everything yet, but you most likely have a team that is doing some of the work and you've been slowly getting things off your plate. You've been allowing people all along to do things for you. Now you need to let go of some of those higher level things. So just remember, it's not an all or nothing. You're jumping in, you're giving everything away on day one. You can get there. It's that step by step thing to get the right things off your plate. And then once you're ready to delegate the more and more higher level tasks, it's still not, okay, I'm going to give this task away to this person. They now own it. Day one, there we go. I'm wiping my hands with it. I'm done. You can have this structure where you're slowly transitioning it to that person. So that way they are learning what it means to make the right decisions and everything and do the right actions, and you're learning to trust them. So it's kind of like one of those things with training. It's kind of like you do it and you kind of show them. So maybe you're walking them through the decision making process. This was a decision that was made. Here's how I went and made that decision. The next time, it might be that they're going to go through their thought process for that decision. You go through your thought process for the decision. And before that decision is actually made or implemented, you talk about it.
Yeah.
You came to a different conclusion. Why did you come to a different conclusion? Which one is better? Which one is right? And as a business owner, recognizing that just because it's your idea doesn't mean it's right. You actually have to think about what's best for the business and let other people bring their ideas to the table. And then you talk about that depending on what it is. It might be a few times of you guys working that kind of in tandem. And then you allow them to say, okay, I want you to go and you're going to do everything, but you're going to present it to me before you implement. They get your sign off, and then after that few times, you're like, "Okay, you really got this. You're really thinking what's best for the business, best for the department. You go and do it, and then just give me a recap afterwards." So you
Yeah.
build up your level of trust in that team member because you're going through the process with them.
They're like levels of delegation, right?
Yes. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
that level of delegation and training really works for all positions you bring into the organization.
It's so important, this communication back and forth and all of the different things. And I've got a line that I use fairly regularly, Jamie, and it's, there are no perfect processes, but we're always trying to perfect process, right? So, and from that perspective, it's kind of like having those conversations back and forth until they truly know exactly what's the expectation and have the full clarity. They're not going to have the confidence, right?
Mhm. Right. And it's one of those things like sometimes people will think, I hired an expert, they should know what to do. So this person, let's say, was a director of operations in a different company. So they should be able to come in and immediately be an amazing director of operations for my company. But they don't know yet how things function in your company. They don't know yet what's going to make
Exactly.
you happy. And if you don't tell them, one of the things I always say is if you don't set the expectations for your employees, they'll set the expectation themselves. And normally it
Yeah.
will not match what you want.
Exactly. When we look at some of the stuff, Jamie, around delegation, and for somebody who's not great at delegating, they know who they are. Like we know ourselves as leaders, right? And it's like if you're looking to start delegating, where do you start? What are some of the tasks that you can start unloading and start letting go?
Yes, great question. So, I want you to look at the list of what you're doing throughout your day or throughout your week and start asking yourself, does this have to be done by me or does it have to be done right? And if it doesn't have to be done by you, if it's not really one of those things that a CEO would own in a business, those are the areas where you can start delegating. And once you really figure out, okay, what should I eventually get off my plate? Because it's not necessarily a CEO task, it doesn't need to be done by me. Then you can start prioritizing those items and say, what's going to give me the biggest bang for my buck to get it off my plate today versus holding on to it. And
Yeah.
so I'll give you an example. In my business, we do a lot of full service recruiting. So
Mhm.
we'll interview candidates for our clients, review a lot of resumes and everything. And I already had a team member that was helping on the back end review resumes, schedule interviews, but I was still doing all the interviews. And as I was like, I want to continue growing my business, I need to spend more time on lead generation. I need to spend more time on marketing, talking to potential clients. But I was like, all right, I'm going to have someone help me with the marketing so I get more leads in the door. And then I looked at my calendar. I was like, but when am I going to fit these conversations because I'm so busy doing the interviewing? And that's when
Exactly.
I realized instead of at first hiring someone for the marketing, I needed to hire someone to actually do the recruiting. So they were going to take over doing those interviews and writing the notes for our clients and all that work. So that way I could focus on growing the business because growing the business was the CEO task that I needed to focus on. Actually, doing the client work was not the CEO task that I needed to be doing at that moment in time.
We're all doing things that we should let go and move on to elevate. And we have to do that for our teams too, as leaders, right? We want them to elevate so that their sort of other jobs can be taken over by other people as well. That's the natural progression.
Yeah, and I think that's so important what you said because as your business grows, typically the role that you first developed and gave to an employee is going to change. And they can't keep doing everything because now they're doing everything all those same tasks at a larger volume. So eventually that role that you hired for has to be split out into multiple roles. So what does that look like? Do you have different levels? So this person is doing the higher level and you hire someone more junior. Do you hire pretty much kind of a second in that role. So you split out the work, say, okay, this person focuses on this territory and this person focuses on this territory. It's recognizing that even within your team members, eventually things need to be delegated from one team member to a new team member.
I've got a framework that I use around this, and it's called love it or leave it. And this whole idea of, work in the area that you really love and let the rest go and assign accountability around that. And it's a very similar sort of to what you're chatting about here today. But once you let something go and you assign accountability, how do you monitor the progress of that?
Yeah, but before we get to that, I just want to challenge you and challenge the audience with that love it or leave it.
Yeah.
There's a comes to a point where you have to decide what type of business you want and if you want to be the CEO and the lead of your business. Because I've
Mhm.
worked with a bunch of clients that they don't want to give up the work that they love. And sometimes that keeps them in the client facing work. And
Yep.
they're like, I'm so overwhelmed. How do I do this? The client facing work is where I always run to, but it's what I love. And eventually you have to ask yourself the question, do I really want to scale my business past where it is today, or am I okay where it is because it allows me to continue focusing on that client facing work and serving the clients and doing whatever that stuff is because you love it. And if you
Yeah.
really love it so much that you don't want to give it up, then you have to make the decision to build a business around you being able to do that work. And maybe that means you bring in someone else to fill that CEO title and
Yeah.
you're the owner of the business, but you're not doing that CEO function so you can do that client work. Or it means, okay, you're not going to grow much larger, so you can do the CEO work and the client facing work, or you need to let go of that work that you love serving the clients because you really want to be the CEO and you want to take this business to a much bigger and higher level. So you do have to ask yourself that when you're going through that, you know, that question of do you love it, or you're going to delegate it, or leave it to someone else. Just figure out what type of business do you want to be creating.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a vital piece of growth, and if you even want growth, you mentioned that too. Like there are some people that are at a certain stage that they don't actually want more growth, and that's okay,
Hmm.
right? That's the beauty of being an entrepreneur. You can make the choices. You own the business, right?
Yes, yes, you do. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get now into our question about monitoring the progress and everything.
Yeah.
The number one thing I think is needed across all businesses is some sort of project management platform, some sort of workflow tool that helps you self-serve when you need answers. So that way, you don't always have to be asking your team member or sending a whole bunch of emails every day of what's the status of this? What's the status of this? What's going on here? Where you can go and see what stage of a project they're on, what is being done. There's a singular place where they're storing files and stuff like that. So if if they're doing this, you can go and see the progress not only in the project management tool, but if you want to take a peek and let's say they're a writer. Okay, what are they writing? Where are they on this piece? And going and just taking a peek. Some way to self serve
Exactly.
is one of the ways to really monitor that progress. And you're not doing it kind of in a micromanaging way where you're like, okay, I need to peek at everything and I
No.
need to control what they're doing.
Yeah.
But you don't want to disrupt your employees' work because you need an update. And maybe you need an update because you're getting ready to jump on a call with the clients. You're ready to
Exactly.
do something where you need those updates, but so to be able to self-serve instead of taking your time to ask for the update and your employees' time to give you the update and disrupt their thought process in order to give it to you. So some sort of project management client workflow tool is essential to really be monitoring the progress. The other thing that you need is check-ins with your team members. I'm a big fan, especially if you have larger teams, multiple people working on a project, or that are doing very similar things, having daily huddles or huddles every other day. So that way you guys can talk about what's going on. If there's things where people can help each other out, they know that, okay, this person has a challenge here. I can go in and help them out. Or I'm listening to say, okay, they're working on this. So I know that this is coming to me next. So your team can all be aware of what's going on. And the beauty about if you have those project management tools, you kind of already know the status going into those meetings. So then you can ask, I see that this project is still in this status. Tell me about what's going on. Are you experiencing roadblocks? Is it what's taking it longer to move to that next phase than the normal project? And you have access to that information. So you're asking questions about what's going on instead of just saying, all right, give me an update on everything because I'm clueless. I don't know what's going on.
Let everybody know how they can get a hold of you and learn a little bit more about growing your team.
So, if you want to learn more about myself or growing your team, you can head on over to growingyourteam.com. We also have the Growing Your Team podcast, so you can tune into that weekly where we talk about hiring and leading teams within small businesses. And one of the things I have for your listeners, if they are ready to hire and really want to figure out, okay, what is the right process, especially if you're hiring for a position that's new to your organization, I have the hiring checklist that brings you through the 8 steps that you need to go through when you're hiring. And your listeners can go and download that at growingyourteam.com/simplify.
Thanks again, Jamie, for being a part of the Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast with me here today.
Thank you, Pete.